now time to hear from four heavyweights. In just a few moments, we'll be welcoming the following guests to the stage for a conversation about their journey to where they have got to today. Our four guests are Dilip Mehta, CEO of Rosy Blue, one of the world's largest diamond manufacturers. May I invite you onto the stage, please? Chandaria, the chairman of UST Global, a leading IT services company headquartered in California, which was recently valued at about $1 billion. Nirmal Jain, the founder and chairman of IIFL Group, one of the largest financial services groups in India. And lastly, Motilal Oswal, chairman and managing director of Motilal Oswal Financial Services Limited. Gentlemen, may I please welcome you all onto the stage. So that's the way to live?
For me, that's the way to live, but I don't impose my values on everybody. And I think the most important thing is to be a good human being. And yes, being vegetarian I think helps you, but I don't think it's the only way to be a good human being.
I think that's a very good point, where often people feel like something like that may make them good, and then other areas they may tail off. So it's about an awareness of all parts of your personality.
Absolutely.
Isn't it?
My family and I, we have always been very strictly vegetarian, so I never thought of an alternative, and it's always way of life.
Let's go back to the beginning. It would be interesting to hear all four of your very first experiences of entrepreneurship. The very first thing you did. I remember selling 1 penny sweets for 2p at school, and that's what my father was proud of. What's the first memory of getting involved in business, however old you were?
I was 16 when I went to live in Surat. And I had no intention, to kind of, I haven't decided whether I wanted to join the business or not. It was just, summer break. And summer in Surat is also pretty hot. But, it's, at that age, it doesn't really matter, the temperature. I went there, and then I decided I'll stay there. And Surat was a diamond city. So I began over there. And before I knew, how to look at diamonds, I was trading diamonds already. And it was so exciting when you're making, in those days, 2,000-3,000 rupees on a trade. You bought a new shirt, you went to a tailor, you went to a movie, and you celebrated that. So, yes, it was a very interesting journey, to start with.
Paras?
Being, again, similar point to the point that you made, we were brainwashed. So we grew up in a house where everybody was an entrepreneur. That's all you heard, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I guess the first experience that I remember was similar to yours, selling conkers. In England, they have this sport, many of you may know, called conkers. And I sold conkers. I'd collect them in Hyde Park at 5 or 6 in the morning, try and get the biggest ones on my bicycle. Maybe I was around 11 or so, and then sell them at school. That time, I think we used to sell them for half a p. For, I think, depending on how good the crop was, you would either sell a few for half a p or one for half a p.
Nirmal bhai?
Yeah, so I'm also born up in an entrepreneurial family. So my father has a retail shop, and when we, I think from college days, we started spending some time there, and he's been very transparent about all the businesses. So we always knew the income, revenue, expenditure, everything. When I say we, means me and my brothers, all three of us. So we pretty much grew up there, and it's like, it's part of life.
Motilal bhai?
Yeah, same thing for me. My father's shop was away, maybe about 100 kilometers away from my home. So in summer holidays, we used to go there. So I used to sit in the shop, take cash, count cash. In the evening, I used to, again, I think, check and give it back to him. And then we used to do accounting in the evening. So I came, at least understood how this business of buying something and selling something works, and how the cash is accounted for.
So at this stage in life, who are your role models? Were they your fathers? It sounds like for a lot of you it was, but it doesn't necessarily need to be. What role models did you have in your life? Who did you look up to a lot?
I guess I was looking at my elder brother, who was, a real inspiration. He still is a very active person, and a lot of people are inspired from looking at him.
For me, I had different role models for different things and different role models at different points in my life. So my role model as a human being was my father, who passed away recently. My role model from a business perspective was my uncle. And then at some point in the last few years, a couple of other folks came into my life from a business perspective. There's a gentleman called Professor Ramcharan, who's a fantastic business guru. So he's been working very closely with me, and I'd say he's currently my business role model.
Nirmal?
It's very difficult to say that role model. I mean, of course, from father, and that's where the entrepreneurship started. But then, I've been watching, reading, and we always seen and worked with many wonderful people. So I started my career with Hindustan Lever, and although it was a job, but that company is amazing in terms of entrepreneurial culture. And after that, I also was working with Motilal ji for 1.5 years, and we set up his research. So there was a completely different kind of experience. And other than that, our job has been research and analysis. So we go and meet entrepreneurs, and you hear their stories and learn a lot from them.
Well, that's what the crowd is hoping to do tonight.
Yeah, in fact. And I've done that for a very long time. So I think I learned many things from many people, and then you evolved your own philosophy and a way of doing business and living life.
Motilal bhai?
See, I can't recollect any particular role model I would have followed, or I at least would admire. Most of my learnings have happened either on the job or by reading a lot of books. So, and I have a habit of reading books, and especially the autobiographies.
So what book, for example, would you take to a desert island? What book could you not live without?
What books?
Which one book would you, is your sort of, is the book that you really has helped you
I think
in life?
the first actually book I read was Made in America by Sam Walton, the Walmart story. How he has really, in his own life, how he created the empire called Walmart, which was one of the largest company at some point of time. So I really got inspired by his entrepreneurship journey. Maybe the other book which I liked is Execution by Ramcharan. So I think there are two books which I definitely would remember, but hundreds of books I've read. So every book has at least taught me something.
Do any of you have any books that really stood out in your life that you would perhaps go back and reread, that you would recommend to the crowd? So there are quite a few books. So In Search of Excellence, there's a Lee Iacocca's was the first book that I started. Then Good to Great. So there are many books that are not entrepreneurial. They're not written by businessmen. So you read Mahatma Gandhi's autobiography, and there's a lot to learn from there for an entrepreneur as well. Sometimes you read some Jain religious, and then, so there are, when I talk about it, and when I have to tell people that what are the key tenets of entrepreneurship, then I try and summarize them in 3H, which is hard work, honesty, and humility. And these are the values that you hear from many businessmen. And you don't really need to learn them from business books, but you can, learn them outside also. From perhaps self-help books or autobiographies from people that you admire.
I'm really bad at reading, and with 3 young kids, I end up falling asleep after reading the first couple of pages. So Ramcharan gave me some very good advice.
Relate to that.
So Ramcharan gave me some excellent advice. He said, we meet so many people in our day-to-day lives. Ask everybody that you meet about what the most interesting thing that's happening in the world is. And if you learn from that one thing, you can learn so much that's more relevant and that's more current. So that's a really great habit, and I try to do that as much as I can.
So what's the most interesting thing happening in the world at the moment?
So I would say right now my mentor, there's 2 mentors that I forgot to mention. And they would never forgive me if I didn't mention them. Of course, my wife, first of all, who's taught me how
They
to be a
say
better...
behind every great man.
Absolutely. So has taught me how to be a better human being. And my son, who just keeps teaching me how to be true to yourself. And his current theory is about Barack Obama and about Donald Trump. So he had an interview at school recently for a new school in the UK. Headmaster, I said to him, tell me something about these two gentlemen. So Kush looked at the headmaster and said, you know, I think Barack Obama's a really good human being and therefore a terrible politician. And he said, and I think Trump was just coming in at the time. He said, and I think Trump is a terrible human being, so he'll be an excellent politician. So that's a new thing that I've learned.
And what does he make of Trump now?
So he still believes that he's right.
Good to know, good to know. Nirmal, you mentioned religion. How much, and I won't always ask you to go first, Dilip, so you know, anyone can jump in. How much has religion, faith, and I know faith is very personal, but this is the time to be open if you are comfortable being open. How much has religion and faith played? What kind of role has that played in your business life?
I mean, it plays a very important role. I mean, it gives you a lot of stability and hope and optimism when things aren't going for you. And it gives you a lot of confidence that, you know, you can achieve and do things and get over and tide over difficult times and look for better days ahead. It also keeps you grounded and keeps you, you don't get distracted or don't get lured by short-term opportunities or, you know, things which are opportunistic, and it tries to keep you on track. So I think it helps a lot.
Does it play a big role in your lives, or actually is it just something on the side?
It sure does, and you know, it brings you a lot of stability, and I think you kind of define your do's and don'ts. And one of the most important things that I actually happened to see it this morning was, you know, you may touch the sky, but you know, you still need to ensure that your feet are on the ground. And I thought it was very interesting, and that's what religion will, you know, kind of give you that experience, that you need to have the humility. That is what's been discussed all the time. And it ensure that, you know, while you're successful, your feet are still on the ground.
What is your, sorry, pardon.
Sorry, I was going to just say that I come from a Jain family. I'm the 5th generation, depending on where you start counting. And we've tried to take the key principles or values from Jainism. And we've always looked at religion, and particularly Jainism, as more of a philosophy than a religion. So we've tried to capture the key elements into our family philosophy first, and then into our business philosophy. So, you know, very similar to what Mr. Hinduja said, we don't do anything with alcohol, ammunition. We've also added ammunition.
In terms of your business
gambling,
interests.
in terms of business, but same way, all the values, the way we do business. We're very clear that we want to sleep well at night. We'd rather not do something and make a quick buck. We'd rather sleep well at night and have a little bit less in our pocket.
But for so many people, the lure of the dollar, the pound, you know, people start out by perhaps having those intentions. We will not, you know, as you say, invest in a bar or something like that.
Yeah.
And then eventually a business opportunity comes up, and then, you know,
So
actually it's quite tempting for...
We have live examples where we've just said no. I mean, I have examples where, you know, the companies that we've invested in have gone and invested. So an example, in Sri Lanka, we had a business which decided, it was in agriculture, it went into pig farming. And the minute I found out, I had to tell the guys, listen, either you exit that business or I have to exit my investment. Simple as that. So we are really, really firm about those principles. And I think it's really important because, you know, at the end of the day, if you make money honestly by doing things that you believe are true, then that's money that lets you sleep well.
What has your experience been like with the Jain community? Have you found it to be supportive? I know the Jain community is not one homogenous group, but have you found the community to be supportive, or actually have you had tough times along the road with people?
See, the community is very supportive. If I look at my own education, I have been studied in various hostels being done by the community. So I think out of my initial 8 to 10 years, I was in the hostels being done by the communities, and that has made a big impact. Even today, I remember that.
Community is very supportive, and if somebody is needy, not only, I mean, even if somebody is a needy outside Jain community, you will find Jain people supporting them. And I think within Jain community, even if there are various sects, as people talk about, but I don't think there's any bitter feeling, between those sects. Everybody follows his own guru, but at the end of the day, for one Jain, I think another Jain will be the first, sort of that, first brethren or first brotherhood feeling. So I don't think there's any, any question there.
Can I just share an interesting story?
Yes.
And you asked about whether you have a business opportunity and would you change your mind? It goes back about 25 years ago. I ended up buying a coffee estate from an English gentleman, and they were not actually interested in the coffee estate was in India. It was identified by a South Indian person, and therefore we partnered together. About 12 months from that day, once my brother was discussing with my mother, and Mafatraji, is very close to my mother, sitting there, and who actually looked at, he always said, that you are like my younger brother. So that's my mother. And we started discussing, and my brother certainly said, that we have coffee is good, but there's a lot of trees, and, we'll have to do the logging, and that will be a lot of money. So my mother said, that's not what we will be doing, logging. And that is not what a Jain family should be doing. Next day morning, my brother called up our partner, and he said, I'd like to exit, buy it at the price. It so happens, I met the people about a year and a half, 2 years ago. They're making a lot of money, thanks, good to that for them. And also, they found a lot of iron ore in that land. So thinking about it, and still, I thought, we made a great decision, that, and we stick to that. So answer is there is no compromise, in that particular values. And that's very important. I was discussing in one of our group this morning, about 25, 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, there was, India was giving licenses, and we were allowed to import whatever you want. 5%, you could do whatever you want. We ended up selling our license to a person who actually imported mutton tallow. And guess what? They mixed it in the oil, as in ghee, vanaspati ghee. And that actually hit the newspaper. But that day onwards, we decided that we would ask people what they're going to use our licenses for. And if it was, for anything that we did not agree, we would not partner with them. So yes, it sticks to that. And we have, regardless of the great opportunities, we wouldn't change our mind.
May I just ask at this point, absolutely be on your phones, and if you're on social media and tweeting about the conference and all those sorts of things and messaging people about it, that's absolutely great. But it would be lovely if the phones are on silent, just out of respect for everyone else who is listening and the gentleman on the stage. That would be brilliant. So just a small request on that part.
It worked.
I hope that was everyone putting their phones on silent. See the power I yield. When it comes to your businesses, and especially both of you, these are family businesses, heavy family businesses. How do you, as you go through the years, how do you balance the trust that you may have for family members versus bringing in someone new with new ideas to keep your ventures fresh? So sort of trust versus capability. Not that the two are mutually exclusive, of course, but how do you work through that conundrum?
So we do it at 2 levels. So every business is professionally managed. and family members, the only time you run a business is when you first graduate. So we throw people in the deep end, they have to run a business, they have to get their hands dirty. And then once we kind of judge them or deem them to be capable, we then put them into running or looking after a series of businesses. But as family members, there are also questions, right? And there's different capabilities. And the problem in every family is around what people think they can do versus what the reality is. And somebody needs to make that judgment. And that's usually where families end up with issues. And I don't think we're any different than any other family. The only difference in our case is that we have such a diverse number of businesses that it gives people freedom to do many different things. And secondly, we encourage entrepreneurship. So, you know, even the younger members, if they want to start something new, we're very happy to let them do it. And we recognize they'll lose some money, but the learning that they'll get in the process is usually invaluable. And so I would say we put a lot of trust in the younger folks, but once they blow it a few times, then we're kind of like a little bit cautious to let them do it again.
So a family member might get a couple more chances than an outsider because they're a family member.
So I think without a doubt, family members get, I mean, I can give my own example. I blew a ton of money when I set up the first garment factory that I set up in Kenya. But what I learned from that, I would never have learned in any MBA.
I was going to say that was your MBA,
yeah.
Wasn't it?
So we call it MBWA, Management by Walking About.
Yeah.
So.
What about you, Dilip?
We have already 4 generations in the business. And, you know, our business is, although, you know, very family controlled, it's kind of mix of professionals and also, you know, people who are distant family. The way we actually operate is, you know, they are all operating partners. And, you know, if they perform better, you know, than my own son, if you like, you know, then they lead the operation. And, you know, it's strangely, it is very good, you know, and people feel, you know, fine with that. One of the challenge, you know, that, you know, and as you correctly say it, you know, as we go forward, you know, we're not going to always be lucky and have, you know, good entrepreneurs, sharp people, and therefore, of course, the big challenge is, what do you do next? And also, you know, like to your point, you know, we actually developing, you know, businesses which are non-core business. We've been not successful, you know, because we learned it very hard way, which is, you know, again, but that actually taught us a lesson, do's and don'ts. And, you know, so when we look at other businesses, you know, we find that there are things that, you know, our children are more interested than in the core business, and that's perfectly all right. So if I was to look at another 20, 30 years from today, are we going to be in the business we are in today? And I would question that. You know, it may not be, you know, 100%, 80%. It may be just part of our business.
The future of many businesses relies on the next generation. How do you keep the next generation hungry, though? I'll give you an example. If you've made some money through your businesses, you are wealthy, you might travel business class. Do you take your children business class with you? And if you do, what gives them the hunger, therefore? You know, these are things to think. I know you have a young family, Boris. You know, you're a grandfather. I know you're at different levels when it comes to the family, but how? It's a discussion that so many people who are successful in business have. You know, they perhaps started out with nothing. So many of your stories, you know.
Can I tell you a story exactly on that? So my parents always flew. When we were young, we used to fly business class. By the time we got to about 8, 9, my parents started flying in economy with us. So we had no choice, and they did it with us, so it seemed, you know, perfectly normal. In our case, we had an incident. We used to fly business with our kids, and the kids decided one day when we had to sit in economy that the seats were too small. And they were 6 and 8 and, you know, kind of ages where it was, that's all they knew. So I said, that's it, to my wife, Anu. I said, that's it. From now on, we're flying economy with the kids. So the next flight to London, we lived in Singapore, 13-hour flight. So we're flying in economy, and I'm suffering more than anybody else, okay? So we get to London. On the way back, I say, I called my assistant and said, listen, I've got a lot of air miles. Can you use those air miles and upgrade all of us? So coming back, we're all now on business, and this idea seems to have failed. We get to the check-in counter, and there's a lady crying about her baby not getting the bassinet at the front of business class. So I said, listen, I'm a Solitaire, Singapore Airlines PPS Solitaire card holder. Why don't you just upgrade me to first class, and then that will give that lady the seat, and the problem's solved. So of course they did it. So I land up in first class. My kids are all in business class with my wife. And Kush starts crying because he's like 4 and he wants to sit with his dad. So I swapped seats with my daughter, who was maybe 10 or 9 or something. So she sits in first class now. So we're doing the opposite of what we set out to do here. We land in Singapore, and Simran comes back and she goes, Pa, first class is amazing. I'm never flying anything again but first class.
Well, the champagne will do that.
So I'm thinking, that's it, we're done. But my wife, being smarter than me, goes up to Simran and says, honey, now you've tasted it. There's only 2 ways you'll ever get this again. You pay for it yourself, and the second is you win a lottery, and the chances of that are not very high. So Simran looks at her seriously and says, Mom, how do I pay for this? She's a young kid at this time, right? So she says, and he says to lawyer or banker. That girl has been driven since that day to be a lawyer. So she's just started studying law at Bristol, and it inspired her. So I think there's ways, there's opportunities to turn things, but you've got to be smarter than me to do it. So that's my takeaway.
How do you think you can keep the next generation hungry when you yourselves have been a success? And therefore may want the luxuries in life and spoil your own children and grandchildren?
I think, to be very honest, it'll be very difficult to get the same level of hunger or maybe what our parents had and we had in our children. But on the economy and business class, my daughter is working with us. Now she's chartered accountant. She is planning to do her MBA from next year. So when she travels on work, she travels economy class, even if I'm traveling business class. But when we go for our holidays for last few years, we all started going by business class. So then I don't distinguish, we can't have it that one child is here and one child is there. So we all travel business class now. But as I said, to put things in different perspectives, at the age of 18, my daughter once said that I want to travel by train. So I want to travel by train. It's absolutely opposite of what my life has been, because till the age of 18, I had not traveled by anything other than train.
And she wants to experience it as a new experience.
So, when you're brought up in Bombay, then the local train is your lifeline. When you used to go to your native place for holidays, then also is... but I think, we can't replicate the same circumstances, because whatever success we had is, at the end of the day, to make sure that, the lifestyle improves. But you try and give them the values, and you try and make sure that, my children, all 3 of them, so we did a camp in Rajasthan, backward village for education, and all of them came for teaching those village students who don't have teachers. And of course, it's summer, and the food there is something which is not easily palatable for them, but I think it's a good experience for them.
Motilal bhai, do you think that successful business people can spoil the next generation a little bit too much and forget about the hunger that they initially had and what drove them when they were younger?
See, the children learn from their parents. So I think whatever struggles or learning lessons, at least I would have got, definitely must have been passed on to them. Now, my son has worked in my office for some time, so he has worked like an employee. I had made sure that he works like an employee. He makes a report to somebody else. Somebody takes his appraisal for every quarter, every 6 months, every year. He eats with the team or the staff. He sits outside. He doesn't have any kind of priority. So I'm sure those kind of lessons are at least putting in his mind that he has to deserve something before he desires. But the hunger at my level may be very different, because I went through different experiences. What he has, because at the end of the day, he may work in the office, but he stays in the same house where I'm staying. we goes on holiday practically. So I would say that the hunger is very less compared to what at least I think I had. Now the time will tell whether I'm right in my judgment or not.
Dilip, do you think your grandchildren will be, and you have 5 grandchildren,
Yeah,
do you think they'll be as hungry as you were?
I'm in business to spoil them. But let's be
Well, that is your
realistic.
job, yes.
Let's be realistic. I think, let's just give you an interesting story. And, this is exactly what you had, but 35 years ago. I'm traveling with my children. And, usually always been first class. There was no business class on those days. And it was fine. And the whole idea was, give them the comfort if we can. So one day, my eldest son, who's now 44, and we were going to, guess where? Singapore. So we were traveling together, and he asked, are we going in first class? And, and that day, it really gave me a shock. And I said, you know what? No, we're going in economy. We traveled economy, but I suffered, just like you. But that said, actually, I'm kind of, when I look at my grandchildren, I ensure that they travel first class or business class because, I want to make sure, that they're very comfortable. But of course, that's grand.
It's up to their parents to make them suffer, not you.
And no, I think, on the other hand, I see that, grandchildren appreciate that. But, staying that, with my son and daughter, they kind of, if the question is, are they hungry? I think they're absolutely hungry. They all want to be successful, and therefore, they want to make sure that they contribute to the success of business or success of their own development. My son is running a hedge fund of his own, and he's doing pretty good, so engrossed. And he did exactly the same thing when he was running the diamond business in New York, worked 14 hours a day. He would wait till India would wake up, and speak to them and make sure, that things do happen. And next day morning, run to the office. So they are hungry, and they all actually enjoy, they enjoy the luxury, but, they know how to get it also as in terms of making money.
So I would add that the hunger doesn't come, the airline thing's a funny example, but that's not what gives you hunger. I think the hunger comes from, first of all, recognizing that you're very fortunate to have what you have. And the examples that were laid out about working with less fortunate people, living with them, spending time, exposing your children to it, that's what really makes them thankful for what they have. And the other thing is they then begin to appreciate that you can have this, but you can lose it. And the only thing that sort of differentiates that is how you study, what you learn, your capabilities. And that's what you need to sort of embrace. And fortunately for me, at least, mine are now doing that. I would say the other thing is the work experiences and letting them go with their passion. So one of the mistakes that we've sometimes made in the family, and I think we've learned from that, is you got to let guys run with their passion. So you may have like the greatest business that is this type of business, but if your kids love something else, you've got to encourage them and let them go with whatever they're passionate about. So we've created businesses nowadays always to sort of encourage whatever that passion is, rather than saying this is it and you're stuck with it.
I think we are debating about economy and business class. Actually, when we were young, we experienced the unreserved second class of a train. And so you can't, actually, and you don't need to replicate those experiences now because the whole world has changed.
Yes.
From a problem of scarcity now, the problem is problem of abundance. You are spoiled for choices. And which is a very different kind of problem now we have.
Sadly, we're almost out of time, so I just want some very quick answers to the following questions. Your sort of key tips for the JITOPRENEURS in terms of any real business lessons that you've learned in terms of regrets, and just, your words of advice that you perhaps wish that someone did tell you, or perhaps someone did. Sort of quick answers if you can, if I can trouble you for them.
I can see a lot of silence here.
Jump in anytime.
Okay. Anybody want to go ahead?
Go for it.
I think, reflecting over, discussions today and, what we have done. I just want to give you a very quick example, So I went to see a play on Srimad Rajchandra. I'm not actually following that. And it was a very interesting example. The person had, Saptalavdi, he could remember 100 things at a time, tasks given to him, and he would then repeat the question at the same time, repeat the question, and then he will have the answer for that particular question. He did that once, and thereafter, somebody from UK had invited him, and this is not a very old story. You're looking at about a bit more than 100 years. He was invited, to do the same thing. And he said that he's not doing it because it actually bothers, and it is for his goal, which he had set, spiritual goal. And he wanted to achieve that goal. But I look at, and then so therefore he did not want to share more of his experience. But that his goal was, his spiritual goal. And looking at, today, what happened, I think, the insight that we got of Lakshmi Mittal and, Gopiji and various other people, I think, the thing that I take from there, we must share, what we have done in our life. It's probably not possible with rapid fire, but if you have a ceasefire, we could do that. That said, yes, it is important that we ensure that people share. It is not their egos talking. It is not, their self-praise. It is important that people learn from the experience of the others. And that's probably better than reading any other business book, to my mind.
Any tips? What can we
Yeah.
learn from you?
No, sorry, you're saying that
Any regret?
no, okay. People who are just younger people who are becoming entrepreneurs, I would say that in the stressful or in the building phase, don't compromise on your health. I mean, just make sure that your exercise, your sports routine and food habits are taken care of. And I don't think that, when you go on vacation, it's a good idea to wake up at 5 o'clock and work. Even if you don't become the richest man in the world, is fine.
I would say perseverance is the biggest thing you need. So you know what? The difference between good luck and bad luck is perseverance. So I would say that's the number one.
What I've learned is, the tendency always is to really find fault with the people who work for you. So I realized it that rather than finding fault with people, we must build on the strengths of the people. That's much more easier to build on the strengths rather than to make him correct whatever kind of faults he would have that.
There's no such thing as a coincidence. That's the other one. So you just, when you sit next to a guy on a plane, you talk to him. And the chances are he's sitting next to you for a reason. And if you make that connection, it's no longer just a coincidence. You can make an opportunity out of it.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. I wish we had more time, but sadly we have run out, and I suspect you can't agree. Thank you so much.
Thank you.